The stars had always called to humanity with their distant, silent light. By the mid-25th century, that call had been answered. Dozens of civilian survey and mining outposts dotted the galactic rim. Humanity's first tentative steps into the vast unknown. The universe seemed endless, full of promise, and mercifully empty of threats. Captain Alara Sato commanded the UES Vanguard, a converted civilian exploration vessel that now led a small reconnaissance fleet. The Vanguard had begun life as a scientific survey ship, all smooth lines and observation bays. Now, hastily mounted weapons pods disrupted its elegant silhouette, a reflection of humanity's growing unease about what might lie beyond the next star. "Captain, we're approaching the Zeta Aurigae system," Lieutenant Marcus Lin reported from the navigation console. His fingers danced across the holographic interface, bringing up system scans. "Standard mapping protocols engaged." Alara nodded, her dark eyes fixed on the main view screen as the brilliant blue-white star grew larger. "Proceed with the survey. Let's be thorough. Colony planners are particularly interested in the fourth and fifth planets. Across the galaxy, in chambers of crystalline splendor that seemed to float among storm clouds, the Calarian Empire's War Council had convened. Supreme Chancellor Vexai, his scaled skin shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that signaled his elevated status, regarded the holographic displays with cold calculation. Maps of conquered territories filled the air around him, hundreds of star systems marked with the Calarian emblem. "The tribute from the Arcturus sector has increased by 17% this cycle," reported High Admiral Jaxar. His head bowed in deference. "The new slave colonies are proving productive." Chancellor Vexai's luminescent patterns pulsed with satisfaction. "As expected. What of the exploratory vessels we detected near the rim? The primitive ones?" "Human vessels, Chancellor. A species only just beginning to reach beyond their home system. They possess no meaningful military capability." Vexai's mouth curled into what passed for a smile among his kind. "Then they will surrender quickly, as all the others have. Prepare the customary tribute demands. General Moruk, your battle groups will be deployed to secure their outposts." General Moruk, a battle-scarred veteran whose skin had lost much of its luster through countless campaigns, inclined his head. "It shall be done, Excellency. I will dispatch Commander Velnus to their outer colonies, while I prepare the main fleet for their homeworld." None in the chamber showed concern. None questioned the outcome. The Empire had subjugated hundreds of species, all of whom now paid tribute in resources and slaves. Humanity would simply be the latest addition to their collection. Among the junior officers standing at attention along the chamber's perimeter, Ensign Darthan listened intently. Young, for his rank, he had earned his position through exceptional tactical scores, rather than the usual path of family connections. This would be his first real campaign, his chance to prove himself worthy of the Empire's glory. "Ensign Darthan," General Moruk called, his voice cutting through the young officer's thoughts. "You will join Commander Velnus. Consider it a training exercise. These humans will offer little resistance." Darthan saluted, touching his fist to his chest. "I am honored, General." The Zeta Aurigae system had proven to be everything the survey team had hoped for. Rich asteroid belts, 2 potentially habitable planets, and minimal stellar activity that might threaten colonization efforts. Captain Sato stood in the Vanguard's observation deck, watching as survey drones returned from their mapping runs of the system's fourth planet. "A good find," she remarked to Lieutenant Lin, who had joined her with the preliminary analysis. "The mining consortium will be pleased with the mineral surveys." Lin nodded, but his expression remained troubled. "Captain, long-range sensors are picking up something unusual near the outer gas giant." "Unusual how?" "Energy signatures, artificial and massive. Whatever's out there, it's not natural and it's not one of ours." Alara's heart rate quickened, but years of command experience kept her voice steady. "Show me." The holographic display shifted, zooming out to the system's edge where a massive gas giant drifted in the distant starlight. Around it, appearing as tiny points of light, dozens, no, hundreds, of objects moved in perfect formation. "Analysis confirms they're vessels," Lynn said quietly. "Size estimates put them at cruiser class and larger. Captain, it's an armada." Before Alara could respond, the communication officer's voice came through the ship's speakers. "Captain Sato to the bridge immediately. We're receiving a transmission, system-wide broadcast on all frequencies." When she arrived on the bridge moments later, the main screen displayed a creature unlike anything humanity had encountered before. Scaled and regal, with patterns of light pulsing across its skin, it regarded the camera with evident disdain. "Attention, primitive human vessels. This is Commander Velnus of the glorious Calarian Empire. Your species has been noticed by the Supreme Chancellor. You will immediately surrender all outposts, resources, and personnel to Imperial authority. Resistance is futile and will result in your extinction. You have one standard rotation to comply." The bridge fell silent as the transmission ended. Alara gripped the back of her command chair, her knuckles white. "Orders, Captain?" Lynn asked, his voice barely audible. Alara straightened her shoulders. "Alert all human settlements in this sector. Transmit everything we've seen to New Terra and Earth, and prepare the Vanguard for combat operations." "Combat, Captain. Against that?" The tactical officer gestured to the sensor readings, showing hundreds of warships. "Yes, Lieutenant. Combat." Her voice hardened with resolve. "Because I will be damned before I surrender a single human being to those creatures." The mining outpost at Orige was never meant to be defended. A collection of prefabricated habitats and processing facilities orbiting a mineral-rich asteroid. It housed 200 civilians, engineers, miners, and their families. When the Vanguard arrived, evacuation was already underway. "We can get most of them onto the transports," Station Director Yuki Tanaka explained, her hologram flickering slightly in the Vanguard's briefing room. "But the last group will need at least 6 hours before they can depart." Alara studied the tactical display showing 5 Calarian vessels approaching the station. They were smaller than the capital ships detected earlier. Scout frigates, most likely, sent to secure what the Empire believed would be an easy conquest. "You'll have your 6 hours, Director," Alara promised. "Lieutenant Lynn, what assets do we have besides Vanguard?" Lynn's expression was grim. "The survey vessels Horizon and Pathfinder are armed with point defense lasers only. 3 cargo haulers, unarmed. The mining station itself has some industrial cutting lasers that could theoretically be repurposed. And we're facing 5 military vessels of unknown capability," Alara concluded. "Well, we'll have to get creative. Director Tanaka, how quickly can your engineers modify those cutting lasers?" What followed was a frantic preparation for humanity's first interstellar battle. Mining charges were converted into makeshift torpedoes. Cargo containers were filled with dense ore and rigged for remote piloting. The station's cutting lasers, designed to slice through platinum-rich asteroids, were jury-rigged into defensive weapons. As the Calarian vessels approached, Ensign Darthon observed the primitive human station from the bridge of the frigate Dominant. "Command, scans indicate minimal defenses. 1 small combat vessel, 2 survey ships. The rest appear to be civilian." Commander Velnus, a veteran of a dozen subjugation campaigns, barely glanced at the tactical display. "Standard approach. Disable their primary vessel, then commence boarding operations on the station. The usual tribute protocols apply." The 5 Calarian frigates advanced in perfect formation, weapon systems powering up. What they didn't expect was for the humans to strike first. "All units, execute avalanche protocol," Captain Sato ordered. From behind the asteroid field surrounding the station, a barrage of modified mining charges erupted, propelled toward the Calarian formation. Simultaneously, the station's repurposed cutting lasers fired, their industrial-grade beams slicing through the void. "Evasive action!" Commander Velnus shouted as the first explosions rocked his vessel. "Return fire! Target their military vessel!" The battle quickly descended into chaos. The Vanguard darted between larger asteroids, using them as shields, while firing its limited weaponry at the Calarian frigates. The survey ships Horizon and Pathfinder, despite their minimal armaments, executed harassment runs that forced the enemy to divide their attention. Most shocking to the Calarians, however, was when 3 civilian cargo haulers, loaded with dense ore and remote-piloted by volunteers on the station, accelerated directly toward the enemy vessels. "Incoming vessels. They appear to be on collision courses," reported a Calarian sensor officer, disbelief evident in his voice. "Civilians wouldn't," Velnus began, but his words were cut short as the first cargo hauler slammed into one of his frigates, the impact and subsequent explosion tearing the warship apart. From his position on the Dominant, Darthon watched in stunned silence as humans willingly sacrificed their valuable ships. "They're using civilian vessels as weapons," he reported, unable to keep the shock from his voice. "Commander, these are not standard surrender protocols." 2 more Calarian frigates suffered critical damage from the improvised ramming attacks. The remaining vessels, including the Dominant, withdrew to a safer distance, regrouping as they reassessed the unexpected resistance. "Report to High Command," Commander Velnus ordered, his luminescent patterns flashing with anger and confusion. "The humans are employing unconventional tactics. Request reinforcements." On the Vanguard's bridge, a ragged cheer went up as the Calarian vessels retreated. Captain Sato allowed herself only the briefest moment of satisfaction before turning to her communications officer. "Status of the evacuation? Final transport preparing for departure now. Captain, they'll be ready to jump to hyperspace in 20 minutes. Alara nodded grimly. "Then we've bought them the time they needed. Once they're clear, set course for New Terra. The Defense Council needs to know what we're facing." As the Vanguard departed the Aurigay system, leaving behind the wreckage of 3 Calarian frigates and the now abandoned mining station, Alara knew that this was only the beginning. Humanity had won its first skirmish against the Empire. But at what cost? And how would they fare against the full might of a galactic power that had conquered hundreds of worlds? On New Terra, the Provisional Defense Council convened an emergency session. The colony world, with its sprawling capital city and 5 million inhabitants, had been humanity's greatest achievement. The first successful terraforming project, now transformed into a thriving society. Today, however, the mood in the council chamber was anything but triumphant. Admiral Diane Ramirez, commander of Earth's modest defense fleet, addressed the assembled representatives. "Captain Sato's encounter at Aurigay confirms what our deep space telescopes have been suggesting for months. We are not alone, and we are not safe." The holographic display showed the Calarian Armada gathering at the edge of human space. Hundreds of warships, from nimble frigates to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything in humanity's arsenal. "How many vessels can we field against them?" asked Counselor Jackson, his face pale. Admiral Ramirez's expression was grim. 37 military vessels across all our colonies. Perhaps another 50 civilian ships that could be retrofitted with weapons, like Captain Sato did with the mining vessels at Aurigay. 87 ships against hundreds? Counselor Mbeki shook her head. "This is hopeless." "Not necessarily," interjected a new voice. Dr. Marcus Vega stepped forward, his lined face illuminated by the holographic displays. The chief scientist of the Terran Research Institute was known for his brilliance and his unconventional thinking. "The Aurigay engagement demonstrated something crucial," Dr. Vega continued. "Conventional military thinking won't save us, but asymmetric warfare might buy us time." He manipulated the holographic controls, bringing up schematics for a massive array of satellites. "This is Project Stormbreaker. We've been developing it as a meteor defense system for our colonies. a network of gravitational lenses that can divert incoming objects. With modifications, it could be repurposed to direct asteroids toward enemy formations. "You're suggesting we use asteroids as weapons?" Admiral Ramirez asked, studying the schematics with newfound interest. "Precisely. The Calarians clearly have superior technology, but physics is physics. Even their warships can't withstand the kinetic impact of a redirected asteroid." The council chamber erupted in debate. Some argued that such tactics violated the principles of civilized warfare. Others pointed out that humanity's very existence was at stake. In the end, pragmatism prevailed. Project Stormbreaker would be accelerated, with installations planned for key strategic locations. Every civilian vessel capable of modification would be converted for military use. Mining operations would be retooled to produce weapons and defensive systems. As the meeting concluded, Admiral Ramirez approached Captain Sato. "Your actions at Orige bought us precious time, Captain, but we need more than time. We need a miracle." Alara's expression remained resolute. "Then we'll have to make one, Admiral." Haven's Rest was a frozen mining colony on the very edge of human space. A collection of pressurized domes and underground tunnels carved into an ice moon. When Colonel Rafael Torres received word of the Calarian threat, he knew his remote outpost would likely be among the first targets. "They'll come here to secure resources before pushing inward," he explained to the colony's leadership council. "We have 3,000 civilians and a security force of 50. The council chamber, hewn from the ice moon's bedrock, fell silent at his assessment. Finally, head engineer Sofia Diaz spoke up. "What about the ice caverns in Sector 7, the ones we abandoned due to instability?" Torres considered this. "Too dangerous for habitation, but potentially useful for defense." "What are you thinking, Sofia?" "We have those prototype railguns from the Asteroid Defense Project. If we position them in the caverns, they could deliver a nasty surprise to anyone attempting to land." Over the next 72 hours, Haven's Rest transformed from a peaceful mining colony into a fortress. Railguns were installed in the abandoned ice caverns, carefully positioned to target likely landing zones. Ionic mines, originally designed to break up ice formations for mining, were seeded throughout the Lagrange fields, where ships would most likely emerge from hyperspace. Civilian structures were reinforced, and evacuation tunnels were prepared. When Commander Velnus's battle group arrived, now reinforced to 15 vessels, they expected an easy conquest. Instead, they encountered a carefully prepared defense in depth. "Multiple detonations in the approach vector," shouted the Dominant's tactical officer as the first ionic mines exploded, disrupting shield systems across the Calarian fleet. "Push through," ordered Commander Velnus. "Deploy landing craft to secure the primary settlement." As the Calarian dropships descended toward the colony's main dome, concealed railguns opened fire from the ice caverns. Hypervelocity projectiles tore through the dropships, sending them spinning into the moon's frozen surface. "Ground forces reporting heavy resistance," the communications officer reported. "The humans appear to have converted their mining equipment into defensive weapons." Velnus's luminescent patterns flashed with frustration. "Bring the cruisers into low orbit. We'll bombard their positions." But as the cruisers descended, they presented perfect targets for the railguns. One cruiser's engines were sheared off by precision fire, sending it tumbling into the ice moon's surface in a spectacular explosion that lit up the frozen landscape. Most shocking to the Calarians, however, was the arrival of 3 civilian freighters, converted into massive bombs and piloted on one-way courses toward the Calarian command ship. Despite frantic point defense fire, one of the freighters connected, its cargo hold full of mining explosives detonating against the command ship's hull. The explosion ripped through 3 decks, killing dozens of crew members and forcing the ship to withdraw from the battle. Commander Velnus, injured in the attack, watched in disbelief as his supposedly easy conquest turned into a costly engagement. "Order a temporary withdrawal," he commanded, blood seeping from a wound on his scaled forehead. "Regroup at the system's edge and await reinforcements." As the Calarian fleet retreated, Ensign Darthan found himself deeply troubled. "Commander," he ventured carefully, "the humans. They're sacrificing themselves deliberately. Their civilian vessels, their infrastructure. They're using everything as weapons." Commander Velnus turned his cold gaze on the young officer. "A desperation tactic, nothing more. They know they cannot win, so they throw away lives in a futile gesture." But Darthan wasn't convinced. Throughout his education in the Empire's academies, he had been taught that inferior species always surrendered when faced with overwhelming force. None had ever shown this level of resistance, this willingness for self-sacrifice. On Corvus Prime, the floating palace of the Calarian Empire, Chancellor Vexai received the reports of the skirmishes with growing irritation. What should have been a routine subjugation was becoming an annoyance. How can a primitive species with no significant military capability be causing such difficulties? He demanded of his war council. General Moruk, who had been monitoring the situation closely, stepped forward. "Chancellor, initial assessments of human capabilities were inaccurate. They are employing unconventional tactics, converting civilian infrastructure to military purposes with remarkable speed. Unconventional or not, they cannot stand against the full might of the Empire," Vexai declared. "Prepare a formal broadcast to their leaders. Make it clear that resistance will result in the extinction of their species." As the War Council dispersed, Calarian Senator Kel Sexnal, known for his more moderate views on expansion, approached Ensign Darthan in a private corridor. "I've read your reports from the front lines, Ensign," the senator said quietly. "They differ significantly from the official narrative being presented to the Senate." Darthan stiffened. "My reports are factual, Senator. If they contradict the official narrative, perhaps the narrative should be reconsidered." Senator Sexnal's luminescent patterns shifted to a configuration that suggested caution and conspiracy. "I believe you, which is why I want you to continue your observations. The Empire has conquered many worlds, but never have we encountered a species willing to sacrifice so much to resist us. This concerns me." "What would you have me do, Senator?" "Watch, learn, and report to me directly. The Empire's future may depend on understanding these humans better than we currently do." As Senator Sexnal departed, Darthan was left with a growing sense of unease. His loyalty to the Empire was absolute, but the senator's words echoed his own doubts. What if the humans truly were different? What if the Empire's standard approach to conquest was insufficient in this case? The Battle of Haven's Rest had bought humanity precious weeks, time that was used to prepare Earth's defenses for the inevitable assault. Project Stormbreaker arrays were hastily constructed in orbit around Earth and key colonies. Civilian ships were retrofitted with weapons, their crews training day and night for combat operations they had never imagined. Captain Sato, her actions at Orige now legendary throughout human space, was given command of a strike force consisting of the Vanguard, the converted tanker Blackfin, now a missile platform, and 3 escort corvettes. Their mission, to disrupt Calarian fleet movements and buy time for the completion of Earth's defenses. "We're not going to win this war through conventional battles," she told her assembled captains. "But we can make it so costly that the Calarians reconsider their invasion." Her strike force engaged in hit-and-run attacks across multiple systems, striking at Calarian supply lines and isolated vessels. For a brief time, it seemed that humanity might actually be able to hold its own against the Empire, until the main Calarian fleet arrived in Sol system. 200 warships, led by Supreme Chancellor Vexai himself, aboard the dreadnought Indomitable, emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Earth's defenses consisted of 20 aging frigates, 50 retrofitted civilian vessels, and the hastily completed orbital platforms of Project Stormbreaker. "All units, battle stations, Admiral Ramirez ordered from her command center on Luna Base. Stormbreaker Control. Begin targeting calculations. Strike Force Vanguard. Execute Operation Last Light. Operation Last Light was humanity's final, desperate gambit. While Earth's defenders engaged the Calarian fleet head-on, Captain Sato would lead her strike force in an attack on Proxima Station, a subspace communications hub that coordinated the Calarian fleet's shield network. If they could disable it, even temporarily, the Empire's warships would be vulnerable to Stormbreaker's asteroid bombardment. The battle began with a massive exchange of fire. Calarian cruisers launched waves of fighters that swarmed Earth's defensive platforms. Human vessels, many of them converted civilian ships piloted by volunteers, engaged in suicidal ramming attacks that claimed several Calarian vessels, but at a terrible cost. Their resistance exceeds all predictions, Chancellor Vexai noted with cold curiosity as he observed the battle from the Indomitable's command deck. General Moruk, begin planetary bombardment. Perhaps they will reconsider when their cities burn. Precision strikes from Calarian battleships began to impact Earth's surface, devastating major cities and military installations. Millions died in the first hour of bombardment alone. Meanwhile, Strike Force Vanguard approached Proxima Station, using the chaos of the main battle as cover. The station, a massive construct of crystalline spires and energy conduits, was defended by a squadron of Calarian cruisers. All ships, execute attack pattern Theta, Captain Sato ordered. Blackfin, launch missiles spread on my mark. The battle for Proxima Station was fierce and desperate. The Blackfin launched its entire complement of missiles, overloading the station's point defenses, but losing half its structure to return fire. 2 of the escort corvettes were destroyed outright, their crews fighting to the last moment. As the Vanguard closed on the station, Lieutenant Lin looked to his captain. The subspace bomb is ready, but we'll need to get much closer for guaranteed detonation. Alara nodded, her expression solemn. Plot a direct course to the station's central hub. All hands, prepare for impact. Captain, Lin protested, that's a suicide run. I know, Marcus. She placed a hand briefly on his shoulder. But this is our one chance to make a difference. Signal the Blackfin to recover our escape pods. You'll command the survivors. Despite Lin's objections, the plan proceeded. The Vanguard accelerated toward Proxima Station, taking devastating hits that crippled its systems one by one. As they closed the final distance, Captain Sato ordered the evacuation, remaining behind with a skeleton crew to ensure the subspace bomb's detonation. It's been an honor serving with you all, she said to her bridge crew as the last escape pod launched. Now, let's make this count. The Vanguard slammed into Proxima Station at near relativistic speed, the subspace bomb detonating on impact. The explosion created a cascading failure that rippled through the station systems, sending out an electromagnetic pulse that disabled the Calarian shield network across half their fleet. In Earth orbit, Admiral Ramirez seized the moment. Stormbreaker Control, execute now. The gravitational lenses of Project Stormbreaker activated, redirecting dozens of asteroids from the nearby belt directly into the paths of the now vulnerable Calarian warships. The impacts were catastrophic. Dreadnoughts torn apart by kinetic energy, cruisers shattered into debris fields, fighter squadrons vaporized in an instant. Shields offline across 60% of the fleet, General Moruk reported to a stunned Chancellor Vexai. We've lost over 50 vessels already. For a brief, shining moment, humanity gained the upper hand. Earth's remaining defenders launched a desperate counterattack, targeting the damaged enemy vessels. Civilian kamikaze ships plowed into Calarian capital ships, causing devastating damage. But the moment couldn't last. The Empire's numerical advantage was simply too great. As shield systems were restored, the tide turned once again. Human defenders were overwhelmed. Project Stormbreaker platforms were systematically destroyed, and the bombardment of Earth intensified. 6 hours after the battle began, with Earth's major cities in ruins and its orbital defenses shattered. Admiral Ramirez made the hardest decision of her life. "Open a channel to the Calarian command ship," she ordered, her voice hoarse. We surrender." Chancellor Vexai accepted Earth's surrender with cold satisfaction, though inwardly he was shaken by the cost. Never in the Empire's history had a primitive species inflicted such losses. Over 80 vessels destroyed or critically damaged. Thousands of Calarian warriors killed. "Humanity will be subjugated," he declared in his formal acceptance of surrender. "But in recognition of their unusual capabilities, they will not be exterminated. Instead, they will serve the Empire through labor and military service." The occupation of Earth began immediately. Millions were processed into labor camps, their skills assessed for usefulness to the Empire. The few military vessels that escaped the battle fled to the outer reaches of the solar system, vanishing into asteroid belts or the vast darkness beyond Neptune. Among those who escaped was Lieutenant Marcus Lynn, commanding the battered remains of Strike Force Vanguard, the Blackfin, and a single escort corvette. With them were the precious few survivors from the Vanguard, including several key engineers and tactical officers. "Captain Sato gave her life so that some of us might survive," Lynn told his assembled crew in the cramped hold of the Blackfin. "Now, we have to make that sacrifice mean something." Over the following 6 months, Lynn's survivors established contact with other human resistance cells hiding throughout the solar system, in abandoned mining stations, forgotten research outposts, and underground lunar bunkers. Slowly, a network formed, sharing resources and information. Their most valuable resource came from an unexpected source. Just before his capture, Dr. Marcus Vega had transmitted a final data package to trusted colleagues across the system. It contained detailed instructions for fabricating asteroid-based weapons, disrupting Calarian communications, and exploiting weaknesses in Imperial technology that he had identified during the brief conflict. Dr. Vega's final gift, Lynn told his fellow resistance leaders during a clandestine meeting in an abandoned Neptune outpost. "With this, we can fight back." The resistance began small, sabotaged communications, destroyed supply depots, ambushed isolated patrols. But it grew rapidly, as humans demonstrated an unexpected talent for guerrilla warfare. Most significantly, Dr. Vega's tactics began to spread beyond Earth. Human prisoners, transported to labor camps on Calarian worlds, shared the techniques with other enslaved species. On dozens of worlds, the seeds of rebellion took root, inspired by humanity's defiance. On Corvus Prime, Chancellor Vexai faced growing criticism from the Imperial Senate. Senator Kel Sexnal led the opposition, citing the enormous costs of the Earth campaign and the spreading unrest. "This is unprecedented in our history," Sexnal declared in a fiery speech. "One primitive species has managed to inflict more damage on the Empire than the last 50 conquests combined. And now, their resistance techniques are spreading to our established territories." Vexai dismissed the concerns publicly, but privately, he was deeply troubled. Reports from subjugated worlds showed a sharp increase in sabotage and resistance activities. Tactics that mirrored those used by humans were appearing on planets where humanity had never set foot, spread through the quiet network of enslaved peoples. After a particularly devastating attack on a Calarian shipyard, where stolen mining explosives had destroyed 3 dreadnoughts under construction, Chancellor Vexai made a remarkable decision. He issued a classified directive to all Imperial governors, a document that would later become known as the Vexai Protocol, concerning the species designated human. The directive read, "Extreme caution is to be exercised in all interactions. Unlike other conquered species, humans demonstrate an irrational willingness for self-sacrifice that makes standard subjugation protocols ineffective. Furthermore, their techniques of resistance appear highly contagious to other subject populations. Therefore, It is the decree of this office that direct engagement with human populations should be minimized. When confronted with significant human presence, the recommended action is immediate withdrawal. Our sole warning: run. For the first time in its long history of conquest, the Calarian Empire had acknowledged that there was a species too dangerous to subjugate, not because of superior technology or military might, but because of an idea that freedom was worth any sacrifice. Ensign Darthan, who had been quietly sharing his observations with Senator Sexnall throughout the conflict, found himself reassigned to a distant outpost far from the front lines. Before his departure, the senator met with him one final time. "You've seen what I've seen," Sexnall said quietly. "The Empire cannot continue as it has. These humans, they've shown us a different way." "A way of resistance?" Darthan asked. "A way of freedom," the senator corrected. "The idea is spreading, Ensign, not just among humans, but among all the peoples we've conquered. And ideas, unlike planets, cannot be bombarded into submission." 6 months after Earth's fall, Lieutenant Marcus Lynn received a transmission from a resistance cell on a distant Calarian colony world. The message contained something extraordinary: footage of alien slaves rising up against their Calarian overseers, using tactics developed by Dr. Vega and Captain Sato. "It's happening across the Empire," the resistance leader on Luna Base confirmed. "Not just here in Sol System, but everywhere. The Calarians are facing rebellion on 100 worlds simultaneously." Lynn studied the footage, watching as beings of different species worked together to sabotage Imperial infrastructure. "Dr. Vega was right," he said softly. "The most powerful weapon isn't asteroids or subspace bombs. It's hope." That night, the human resistance broadcast a message across all frequencies, directed not just at fellow humans, but at all the oppressed peoples of the Calarian Empire. "This is humanity, speaking to all who hear. We may be defeated, but we are not broken. We may be conquered, but we are not slaves. The Empire believes that overwhelming force can crush the spirit of freedom. They are wrong. To all who suffer under Imperial rule, know this: you are not alone. Resistance is possible. Freedom is worth fighting for. And together, we will reclaim our destiny among the stars." Across the galaxy, in hidden places and whispered conversations, the message spread. The Calarian Empire had won its war against humanity, but at a terrible cost, for in doing so, it had planted the seeds of its own destruction. The first battle against humanity would be its last great conquest. And it had all begun with a single act of defiance: Captain Ilara Sato's decision to stand and fight at Origi Outpost, rather than surrender a single human being to alien rule. In the dark of space, aboard the battered remnants of Strike Force Vanguard, Lieutenant Marcus Lynn looked out at the stars and allowed himself, for the first time since Earth's fall, to smile. "We haven't lost yet," he whispered to the memory of his captain. "In fact, I think we've only just begun."